about the crazy pictures I showed her?
I today? No, I passed each other in the parking lot.
If there are pictures that the photographer took of him and his daughter
I did my last day of teaching until January, and I'm exhausted.
Oh, yeah, but now you gotta read them.
I talked to Peru, wonder if he happened on Saturday and then on Sunday. I talked to the high school and checked it for his usage in Facebook, you know, they have that in their messenger. There's a phone thing.
I didn't know
Phone
that.
thing. You can talk iPad to iPad.
Wow.
We couldn't do the Apple thing, I think, because the Wi-Fi, she has Wi-Fi.
You probably didn't want.
It might have been really 2G. So we're talking Apple, and so I'm talking to her son, and they gave me this invitation.
Yeah, wow, wow,
And it was better than the Wi-Fi.
nice. Yeah, you know, I talked to my friends in England, and,
Do you Skype or?
well, we used to Skype, but we've been lately using the,
Vibe, B-I-B-E is another one we use.
what's the Apple one?
That's the one, FaceTime.
FaceTime, yeah.
Yeah, we tried, we did
We used that,
FaceTime
and
in
it's great.
Lima, and it was wonderful. I'm looking
Yeah.
at it and going, oh my God, and I've been telling them for a while, do you have FaceTime? Do you have FaceTime?
Yeah, and you take the iPad and you, oh, look
Oh,
what I
look, here's
made.
my car, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, here's our tree.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah,
There
I
you
love
go.
FaceTime, it's great.
Candy canes, everything's all Christmassy.
Yeah, except your shirt is about as Christmas as my outfit, you know? They're all decked out, but
It was
I'm
in the
not.
Phoenix paper.
This is all Christmas.
Next year I'm gonna have to
They,
read
they dropped the case
the
today.
meeting before Christmas, I'm dressed for
I'm
Christmas.
dressed for Christmas.
From Chris, Steve,
That's all,
Figured they'd have
it's all good.
and because of this.
Yeah, so this is gonna be a quick meeting, right? We never know.
Yeah.
Norm Friedman was the.
He brought this, well, his wife's an attorney. Political committee is unconstitutional because it's vague and overly broad. Yep, makes sense. Well, it makes sense, but it took somebody to take it all the way up, and you have money to do it.
Well, it's only on, it's only a district court decision.
Well, and you can choose to, which state is it in? Arizona?
Fountain Hills.
Yeah, you can choose to recognize it or not.
Fountain Hills.
Will the state take it any further?
I don't know, because the judge kind of, it was an interesting decision as to whether the state actually has standing to take it further. I'm not
It's
sure I
kind of like
understood
a
that part of the
criminal
discussion.
action if they decide to charge a criminal as double jeopardy, so the
No,
state
no,
can't go further?
it's a declaratory judgment,
Oh, yeah.
and the judgment is actually against Fountain Hills, but the state intervened, and it gets complicated.
Oh, the state intervened?
I wasn't looking at it for that, I was looking at it for the matter at hand.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a very interesting discussion. Teelborg is a really good judge,
Is he?
very well thought of, and his reasoning on it.
So it's unlikely it'll go any farther then?
Yeah, I think it probably is, but it should. I think maybe the legislature would
You have to rewrite the law, I guess, yeah.
You need your green hat there, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing when I'm talking to my students when they start when people rant about the Supreme Court, it's like,
So are you a Santa
yeah, but
or a Santa?
Congress could overrule it by rewriting the law.
That's
What?
right.
I don't know why you're complaining about the Supreme Court, they can change it, you know,
Yeah.
don't blame them. I'm trying to find what I did with the name you gave me, can you write it down again so I don't lose it?
Oh, Kathy Manketti.
Yeah, write it again for me, and this
Okay.
time I'll put it in my wallet so I don't lose it.
All right, that's right, I'll get it.
Because I think I may be able to find your,
That'd be cool. That'd be fun if, after all these years, if she ever did get to do the Peace Corps thing, you know.
Well, I'm sure she'd want to make contact with you, because it's wonderful after 40 years, my
Yeah, my wife might take a dim view of it, but,
before you knew.
oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, she and I were high school sweethearts, so, long time back. Way long time back. Pardon me? Yeah, sure will, sure will. Oh, that's cool.
And I'll remember where I put it.
Shoot, three, I think. It is dynamic.
The Master Chief Jester.
Well, that's the other side of the personality.
So as you go up the ranks in Jester, you get another tip.
You get another tip, that's it. Thank you for the card.
Yeah, thanks, that's a really nice thing to do.
Yeah. I'll hang that on the tree when I get home.
Okay, well, it's in my purse.
All right,
so
that'll work.
I'm sure it'll turn up and I'll go, who's Kathy Van Kitty?
Who's Kathy and Kitty? Yeah.
Hi, Mary.
Good morning, Chief. Ah, you bless me. You're all right.
I can wait.
You are something. Are these from you? or-
Yeah, that's for you.
I
Yep.
think there weren't when I looked. Agendas. And I have a short one, but I used to short one and they weren't out there when I was out there.
I was gonna say, you know, it's been a hard day when I'm drinking coffee at 6 o'clock in the evening.
That coffee will stand by itself.
That's good.
Yeah.
If
You
it,
have
if
no
it,
problem.
if it won't, it's not worth drinking.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay.
Oh, did we get water? Yes, I got water.
So how you been? That busy, huh?
Busy.
Here comes the agua.
Agua.
Don't say that, we just can't do it.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, nice and chilly.
Did everybody check their envelopes for their white powder stuff?
Yeah, and perhaps.
Mine was full.
I thought it was already taken.
Where's Mikey?
He's still in California.
She said he's
I don't know
to
how
let her know when we get ready to fire up.
his son's doing.
Big crowd.
Yeah. Okay, Jamie, while the screen is wandering down, if you want to dial Mike up. Jamie, if you wish, we can go ahead and give Mike a call. Come on, Mike.
Hi.
Oh.
Bye, Nancy.
Oh, yeah, let's tell her to have him call in. Do you have a number he can call in? Or,
You might, this is Jamie, we're trying to get a hold of you for the meeting. You can dial in 636-2646.
State Transportation Board wants to hold one of their meetings, their annual meeting here in Chino.
I don't have my phone with me.
now we'll go ahead and get started. The State Transportation Board wants to hold a meeting here. When?
I'll get all the information tomorrow night. so we
Cool,
can bring it
okay.
to-
We're gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. And I guess we can try Mr. Best again later on if he doesn't call in, okay? Call to order, may we have the roll call?
Councilmember McKee.
Here.
Councilmember Turner.
Here.
Councilmember Wojcik.
Here.
Councilmember Hatch. Here. Councilmember Best is not here at the moment. Vice Mayor Croft.
Here.
And Mayor Marley.
Here. Consideration and possible action to adopt resolution number 14-1054, approving the form and authorizing the execution and delivery of a loan agreement with the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority of Arizona, WIFA, from its Clean Water State Revolving Fund program. Mr. Duffy, I believe you have the presentation?
Yes, sir, I do. Thank you, very much, Mayor and Council. Look forward this evening to actually taking almost the final step in getting this transaction completed and taking a real positive step forward for the town of Chino Valley. As you know, we've applied for a clean water loan with WIFA, and I just would like to, just a brief update on what we've done. Of course, on October 7th of 14, we approved an agreement with Fan Contracting to buy out their construction management at risk contract for the wastewater treatment plant. And to do that, we agreed he would finance that loan at 9% interest starting on January 1st. However, we decided that it'd be better for the town to finance this loan through WIFA. So essentially, if you look at it simply, we're refinancing the debt that we've already approved for the wastewater treatment plant at a significantly lower interest rate and better terms. On November 18th, you adopted Resolution 14-1051, authorizing the town to apply for the clean water loan with WIFA. And tonight, before you is Resolution 14-1054, authorizing the execution and delivery of the loan agreement with WIFA. If it's approved this evening, our intent is to close the loan on December 30th of 2014. The particulars are in Exhibit A, and let me give you that page number. On page 36 in your packet. And this is really the meat and potatoes of the loan with WIFA. The closing date, of course, is 12/30 of 14. The first payment due will be on July 1st of 15. Now, the original loan amount was $3,442,500, but WIFA has given us essentially a grant or forgivable principal of $478,829. So the amount that we're going to have to repay back is the $2,963,671. It's a 20-year loan. The interest rate will be determined, and Mark Reeder will explain this on December 26th. And he has some pretty good news about that. We have to fund a reserve fund, and that's essentially they give us 5 years to build up enough cash to make our annual debt service payment. So, and that'll basically be our annual debt service payment divided by 5. And we've already funded these reserves. They're held in our accounts, and they're really just a requirement of WIFA, and I report to how much to them every year on our current loans. And then, of course, the annual payment will be determined at closing. I wanted to break out, Mark has provided us the sources and uses of funds. And so I wanted to break out and make sure the council thoroughly understands where the funds are going to go and how much town funds are going to come. And
Excuse me for just a second, Joe. Usually I don't do this, but Mike Best is calling me on his cell.
that will be fine.
Good morning, Mike. Jamie is going to try and call you up again. Usually I don't answer my phone during council meetings, but you're a familiar voice. So anyway, we'll get you. Okay, hang up and she'll call you, okay? All right, bye. Now, if he doesn't answer, we're in trouble.
Hey, there you go. Okay, you have joined the meeting.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mike. Joe was just getting us started. If you have your packet with you, it's on page 36 of 137. Go ahead, Joe.
Right. Just to summarize the sources and uses of funds, we're going to have $3,442,500 of loan funds. Of those, we're going to disperse $3,240,300 to FAN to pay off the CM at risk contract. We're going to pay him $132,500 when the screen's installed, and we've received that. We have a financial advisor fee that we're going to pay with loan funds and the bond counsel fee of financial advisor. The loan funds will pay $46,000 and the bond counsel $23,700. The town is going to put in $200,000 worth of funds. And part of it, at the $69,700, that's amounts that we've already paid FAN from the time we came up with our amount that we were going to pay him. As homes are being built, we've been collecting these funds, so we've already remitted that money. Okay, so basically we're not going to spend it twice. The money we will have to come up with in cash, though, is for the remainder of the financial advisor fee, the remainder of the bond counsel fee, and any other funds as far as printing and everything else. So we put an $8,000 cushion.
Yes, ma'am. Joe, go ahead.
Were we budgeted for that cash money? And if not, where are we taking the money out of?
That's the next slide. I do have that. Good question, very good question. So the net disbursement to FAN will be the $3,240, and then we've already paid him $69,700 on it. So here's where the town funds will come from. We've, as you can see, we've previously paid FAN through June 30, $57,400. We currently have collected and owe FAN $12,300. The CM at risk fees, Ron is committed to getting that plan under our belt by April 1st. So we will have the net income for 3 months that we're not going to be paying FAN. Plus, the sewer account has $65,000 in contingencies. I'm recommending we use $60,000 in the sewer fund in contingencies to cover. So those are what add up to the $200,000.
What about the bond counsel and the advisor?
Well, this is where the money comes from. This is the $200,000 where the funds come from to pay for our portion.
This is cash that we're using,
Right.
so it's not technically in the budget, but it will be in the budget.
Yeah, we do have budget capacity to do it, yes. Yeah.
But we're not specifically budgeted? When this money comes in, does it go into contingencies or what?
No, actually, we did budget for the bond offering,
Okay.
but we didn't budget to spend it out of the sewer fund. So we're going to be spending the sewer contingencies, and we didn't budget for the income for the CM at risk either. So we're going to use the sewer fund on it. But we budgeted for the full amount in the bond, in the capital improvement fund for the bond issue.
Okay,
So we do have budget capacity.
so we're okay moving it?
We are, yeah. And I like the idea of not having to finance the fees, the final fees on this. I think it's better off for the town. So with that, I'd like to introduce Michael Piso, our bond counsel, and he's going to talk about the pledge and the issues he deals with.
Yeah. Chris? Yeah, I think we're good. Yes, sir.
I have a question on the resolution on page 12 of 137, paragraph 2.3, project description.
Yes, sir.
Is anybody there? I'm waiting for Joe to find his place here.
Project would have been described.
Page 12 of 137 in our packet.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
you must be looking at.
I don't have the page numbers on my information.
Oh, okay. Here, let me
Is it in
pass
the-
this
I
to
think it may be in
you.
the loan agreement itself.
The resolution, this is the resolution for the
Page 2 of my,
205.
Yeah. Oh, the WIFA resolution.
WIFA resolution.
2 point what?
Yeah, that's right after.
Which section?
2.3.
It's just below the
Yeah, what paragraph?
Yeah, right here.
two.
Yes, sir.
I got it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There's a reference in the paragraph 2.3, the last paragraph says the second component will extend sewer along State Route 89 between Road 2 North and Road 3 North for a cost of $3,112,500.
Right, right. Yeah, this is the WIFA resolution that was took to them when we had our full GO bond offering that we're going to do. This is the resolution that WIFA approved. And WIFA staff told us we did not have to take it back to them because we've reduced the scope of our project.
Okay, but
So-
none of the money is going to be
None of the
for-
money on this, yeah, because the WIFA board approved it for this amount, we're coming in at this amount, so we didn't have to
All
do
right.
that.
Okay, good. Excellent question. Thank you. Yeah,
So I'll introduce you to Michael Cookies.
all right.
Mayor, members of the council, Michael Cafiso with the law firm of Greenberg Traurig in Phoenix. Joe asked me to come up quickly, and to the extent it's possible to do so quickly, to explain the pledge structure to you. In other words, what are you pledging to repay the loan you're approving from WIFA? Let me give you a little context in terms of the history. Back in 2007 and 2008, we found it necessary, as you probably know, to finance the collection system for Chino Meadows. WIFA, after an election was the entity that we decided to use to do that. That project had to be done in phases. So in 2007, we actually did a loan agreement with the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, and then we did a promissory note transaction with the United States Department of Agriculture through Rural Utility Services. We then came back in 2008, and we did another loan agreement with WIFA. That had to be done on a subordinate basis because of a change in the structure of the revenues that were pledged. And then we did 2 more notes with Rural Development to complete the project, Rural Utility Services. The bottom line is that the way the structure of the transaction is established, and Joe and I were talking about a minute, is probably, I could easily tell you that WIFA would consider it the most complicated pledge they have of all the pledges they have on their loan agreements. They basically call us to ask us how to answer any questions they have about it because it's very difficult to sort out. Basically, what has now been set up is a sort of a 2-tier structure. You have a set of tests that relate to debt that's payable, secured and payable only from town excise taxes. So that's transaction privilege, local transaction privilege, fines, forfeitures, permits, fees, and state shared revenue, state shared sales tax. So you have one leg, if you will, of your debt structure that's secured by that. The other leg of your debt structure would typically be secured just by utility system revenues, in this case, the sewer revenues, net revenues of your sewer system. Back in 2007 and 2008, when we went to WIFA and to Rural Utility Services and told me what we wanted to do, they kind of chuckled and said, yeah, well, your utility system is not cash flowing. We're not willing to just take your utility system. So they also wanted a pledge on your excise tax revenues, this other basket of things that I just described. So basically, they have a pledge of both utility system revenues and sales taxes on an equal basis to the pledge we use over here for your excise taxes. But we created 2 different tests so you'd have flexibility with your excise taxes to do the kinds of things you normally do with excise taxes. And so that's how we set it up. It's fairly complicated. We worked with Mr. Reeder and staff this week to run the test to make sure the test has been satisfied to do the debt we're about to do. Basically, under the structure over here, I'm sorry to be using my hands. I don't know if it's helping for TV or not, but I think it's a little easier to describe without a whiteboard. But for this side of the equation, in other words, net system revenues plus excise taxes, that basket of revenues I described, there's a specific test we have to meet before we can issue additional debt secured by this, which is different from the test over here. The test over here is a minimum of what we call 1.2 times max annual debt service coverage. So you have to be able to show that this test shows at least 1.2 times. When we ran the test this week, it's about 800 times, 800% times. So instead of 1.2, you got 8 point something and change. Mr. Reeder may have the exact number. So we were able to meet the test, and so it seems to work pretty well. the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority folks and rural development are protected because you're not over-leveraging yourself, and at the same time, you've got the flexibility to use both kinds of debt. To be a little bit more specific about this kind of debt, and I'm sorry again to keep using my hands, but the utility system revenue excise tax debt, what we agreed there was that when you can meet a certain test for 5 years in a row, the excise tax falls off completely, and this becomes just a utility system pledge. And that's one of the goals that staff has in terms of going forward with this, that eventually the utility system becomes self-sufficient, and you don't need that excise tax pledge. That'll free up even more capacity over on this side as the town grows to do additional things. One more piece of complication, just to kind of paint a picture of what's going to happen when we do the next transaction, which is a water transaction. WIFA has basically said the same thing to staff. We're not going to let you just come in and use water system revenues. So we're going to have to, beginning of next year, go in and work with WIFA to amend the total pledge for everything so that they have a combined utility system pledge plus the excise taxes that I described over here. So it's going to get even a little bit more complicated before it gets simpler, but that's what it took back in 2007, 2008 to get all this done. Unfortunately, there was a need to get that done to avoid some serious problems in the Chino Meadows area. It probably wasn't the best time in the world for the town to consider doing it, given what was going on at that time period, but it had to get done. So with a lot of compliments to the then staff and Mr. Reeder, we cobbled together the cheapest sources of money, but in doing that, at the same time, we had to give them the kind of security that they wanted to do those transactions. So a lot of detail there. I'm glad to pull out the transaction and explain it to you component by component. Mr. Reeder and my associate and I sat and did that for a half an hour earlier, or actually late last week, but I'd be glad to do that if you wanted or address questions.
No problem. Councilwoman Hatch, you're first, and then I have a question.
You know, I may be overreacting here, but you just spoke about combining them after the first of the year. Now, do these continually, one of our big concerns is that they remain separate and not combined. When you talk about combining them after the first of the year, you're not combining them into one pool of money. They're remaining separate?
They remain separate for your bookkeeping purposes, but in terms of the pledge, that's, at least unless it's changed, that's the plan going forward. That's the plan going forward. So you maintain the two systems in terms of bookkeeping here, the way you just described, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
And one is not required to support the other if there's not enough funding for one over the other.
No, I think that's, and again, I probably shouldn't have given the preview. I was kind of hoping to put that in your mind so you'd remember it, but that's my understanding, and we'll deal more with that when we address that one later on in beginning of next year.
Because in the past, they've talked about the one not being capable of surviving unless you use money from one to support the other, and I just want to make sure that when we do the WIFA, that they're remaining separate.
Mayor, members of council, I think that's staff's plan, is to make sure the rate structures for each are satisfactory to pay what they need to do. But again, not to walk myself into the trap, but it's one thing what you would like to do and what you plan to do. It's another thing as to what the lenders require you to do. So again, we have, and again, we could spend a lot of time talking about this if you want to. We do financings all the time where they'll say be a pledge source. Say we have done financings, for instance, where the only thing that WIFA gets is your sales tax. But the amount's never paid by the borrower from sales tax. It's paid from some other source, typically utility system revenues. But WIFA says, we're not confident enough in your utility system revenues right now. We want a pledge of sales tax. There's a big difference between the pledge and what you ultimately use to pay. And so those two things can be very different. And again, in talking to staff, and we'll be providing more information about this, there's a definite plan to make both systems self-sufficient here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have a real hard time voting for a combined system at this point, given what the voters did. And so I just want to make sure I'm understanding what we are actually voting for here. My second question, go ahead.
No, I was going to try to make it clear that that's certainly not something we're discussing tonight.
Okay, my second question has to do with a question that came up from EDA, and that was what our bonding capacity would be after all of this is done. Do we still have bonding capacity if we need it once we do these two transactions?
Mm-hmm.
Does the town still have bonding capacity?
Mayor, members of the council, Ms. Hatch, that's more in Mr. Reeder's bailiwick, but I think the 1.2 minimum threshold you needed to meet when you're actually at 8 point something means you've got a bunch of capacity there. In terms of just excise tax debt, which is typically what you'd use for EDA kind of purposes, Mr. Reader can probably best address that, but I think you're pretty healthy in that regard. Are we taking off or are we landing?
He needs to put, that's wind, he
I'll-
needs to put it on mute.
I'll ask Councilman, I'll ask Councilman Best to try and get the side noise down in a moment. Just wanted to verify two things. One, by pledging the TPT taxes or our excise taxes and our utility system revenues, we've not only met WIFA's requirements, but we've exceeded them as far as the test is concerned.
By huge magnitudes.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor.
And the second question is to unencumber our TPT taxes or excise taxes. It'll be 5 years after, if we do the water system purchase, it'll be 5 years after that water system purchase is
The
in
test,
place.
that will help the test. Well, again, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here because we haven't done the water deal, but the test is a 5-year consecutive test of the revenues not the combined revenues that we're talking about over here. You got to separate out the excise taxes. You look just at the utility system revenues, that two-piece. For 5 years, that has to be adequate to meet the 120 test. And once that happens, then the excise taxes fall away and WIFA has no right to them anymore.
Excellent,
So
excellent.
that's-
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the goal.
All right. Mr. Best, did you have any questions? Okay. Could you hear me okay, Mike? He's on the space shuttle. Mike, can you hear me okay? Mike Best?
Apparently not.
Hey, Mike!
There you go.
There you go, that's what you gotta do,
All
Mayor,
right.
you gotta talk up.
Just, I think the people in Albuquerque heard him. Yes, we just wanted to make sure, did you have any questions for Mr. Cafiso?
You have to have the last
A little bit gargled.
Okay, Mike, did you have any questions for Mr. Cafiso?
Needs to have a headset on.
You want me to
No,
ask?
I think we've discussed it enough and worked through it that, we just need to vote on it and get it done.
Okay, thank you. I guess Mr. Reader's up.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Mark Reeder with Stiefel Nicholas. I want to, I've got a handout for you like I normally do. I want to walk you through a few details, a little bit of a repeat. I know you're probably tired of seeing some of this repetitive stuff, but we think it's important to keep you up to speed. Before I do that, I'll try to answer Mrs. Hatt's questions relative to bonding capacity. Good question. In other words, you're going to close, hopefully going to close the sewer financing here by the end of the year, and then as mentioned, we'll be back in front of you, I think, in the first quarter of 15, right around there, I think, Mr. Smith, correct me if I'm wrong, for the other two water acquisitions in which you're going to add scale to your system. We talked about that last time, which is positive. So, in reviewing, and maybe Joe can help me with this a little bit, in reviewing the pro forma that I think's been presented to you by Mr. Duffy and by Mr. Jackson, the town has done a good job of separating the sewer and the water financials, if you remember, okay? And the water is, especially with the acquisition of the new customers coming on board next year, is a little healthier of a system. And based on the revenue projections here that Joe provided and Dan Jackson provided, your coverage, remember the 1.2 times coverage covenant that you're required to maintain so you can release your excise taxes? Operating revenues, okay, minus operating revenues minus operating expenses, not depreciation, okay, gets you kind of a cash flow number before debt service. So you pay all your operating expenses first. Then you set your rates and charges sufficient to where you pay your debt service, okay? And you're supposed to have 20 cents left over for each dollar as a cushion. Is everybody with me? For both systems, that's the goal. That's the goal of a pretty strong utility system when you can meet that 120. The way it's set up right now, I'll come back to bonding capacity in a moment, when you achieve that 120 for 5 consecutive fiscal years, you're going to release the excise tax pledge. Does that make sense? So according to the projections, I think the town has that in its planning horizon. Each budget year, you're going to get updated numbers on your utility, and then you're going to adjust your rates and charges accordingly. Fair? Based on, new customer growth, based on revised operating expenses, either upwards, frankly, or downwards, based on some expenses. We know we got fixed debt service. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then, as it relates to the ability to issue additional probably revenue bonds, fair was your question, Mrs. Hatch? Bonding capacity to issue additional revenue bonds for either water or wastewater.
I think the EDA was concerned with respect to a grant that we're considering for infrastructure at Old Home Manor, and perhaps what the sequela to that, if there is some.
Right.
It was a question he asked when he was
Yeah.
standing there looking at what was there, so wanted to know what the town's bonding capacity was if that prior bond issue passed.
Right.
And I was led to believe we were probably in good shape. I asked for verification, but I'm just asking the question again now that we're in a different situation.
Right. And I'm focusing on revenue bond capacity for the moment. Obviously, you have the GO capacity, which I don't think
Obviously,
that's
it's probably not going to happen.
probably not going to happen. So I'm focused on, like frankly, a lot of cities are with the utilities of revenue bonding. So I do see, based on the projections, some revenue bond capacity for the water, because it's especially if you get the Prescott acquisition done, as well as Wellhoyt. The sewer's got a little more sausage to make, if I can use that analogy, a little more iron bending relative to your rate structure. So based on these projections, there's not a ton of that right now, but if you found yourself in a situation where you needed to do a new project, there may be the requirement to edge your rates and charges accordingly. Just depends on the amount of debt, how far you stretch it out, can we refinance prior debt, which, as I mentioned to you, is on my radar screen. I do want to come back next year and see if we can do that. So I hope that's helpful relative to how the revenue bonding capacity is looking for the town between the two systems. Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Just briefly for our council's information, I've talked with both our town manager and Mr. Duffy about one of my goals is that we don't adjust our sewer rates any further north. So we have to keep that on the horizon all the time. And so anyway, yes, ma'am.
I have another question when you're done.
Okay.
Yes,
Just
sir.
wanted to let you folks know that we'd had that discussion already, and I'm sure that's on some of your minds also. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think I heard you say that we're doing one water and maybe two more after that, 2 more acquisitions. I wonder if you could explain that. Is this water now just the Prescott water system, or are we talking about something different and adding the 2 others, something separate, or does the present one you're talking about with WIFA include Will Hoyt and some of the others? Or what are the 2 others, or did I misunderstand you?
Okay, I'm sorry, maybe I was talking fast, I apologize. Tonight's focus obviously is on sewer and that decision to acquire that. Where I was going with the future bonding capacity that you may need in the future, whether it be water or wastewater, the acquisition and the hopeful closing of the Prescott customers, how many customers is it? 650 customers, and the smaller Wellhoyt has been incorporated into the pro forma, the projections relative to water. Additional customer base, which is helping your revenue stream. And that'll help your bonding capacity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if I can just hand this out, just have a few more things to share with you, which I hope is helpful.
Thank you.
We're going to be moving forward, as Mr. Duffy said, very soon. If the resolution is adopted tonight, we're going to go to work this week to start moving towards closing. Dotting the i's, crossing the t's, closing the transaction. I've been yelled at a few times by a few city clerks, and I've learned the hard way to always make sure they get a copy of the documentation. Okay. Maybe you all have been yelled at too. Okay. So we're moving towards closing, assuming a successful resolution this evening. We'll be working closely with Mr. Duffy on this. And as you know, and as Mr. Duffy said, WIFA's cost of borrowing is tied to an index, if you remember. And it's tied to the natural AAA 20-year general obligation bond index that comes out every day. It's the main index utilized in the industry to help establish interest rates in the municipal bond market, natural AAA rates that City of Phoenix, City of Scottsdale would borrow at, for example. So the chart you have in front of you, sorry about all the lines, but just take you to the red line. The red line is the 20-year index, because you're borrowing over 20 years, okay? And so you can see where the trend is, and since we spoke last, the trend has been downward again, which is, say your prayers between now and the 26th. And on that day, this index will come out, and Joe and I will get together, we'll calculate it, okay? I calculated it today. Rates are down because of a lot of geopolitical concerns out there that you're reading in the paper. The market's a mess. You got the oil downfall. There's a huge, what they call flight to quality, which means people want to buy bonds, and it's driving rates down. So really, if this holds over the next, 10 days, I'm not sure that you really could have picked a better time to close your financing. I mean, if you look back on a 60-year historical perspective, so things are lining up for you really, really nice if things hold together over the next 10 days, which I think they are. Okay, with that background, since we spoke, that's the graph that shows you the downward trend. The next page is the sources and uses of funds, which Mr. Duffy has handed out to you. This should match his sources and uses of funds. We just wanted to have this in here again for your review. Okay, the $478,000 grant is fantastic, as you know. That's free money to the town. The next page is where it says bond debt service, the third page back. I calculated the number today at 1.94%. So if the city closed your loan today, we'd be at a 1.9425%. Okay? Now, as you can see in the right-hand corner, that means about $185,000 in annual debt service payments. So now I'm going to go look at some of the pro formas that we were just kind of talking to, and of course, Mr. Duffy, Mr. Jackson always try to be conservative. They have $199,000 in here. It looks like if you close today, you'd be about $184,000. Okay, that's going to help that coverage that we're talking about. It's going to help your rate structure. If you look at the WIFA loan agreement, I think they have 200 and some thousand. Joe, how much was in there? 215,000. So I guess my point on this is that we'll just really trust and pray and hope over the next 11 days that we're going to get on or around below 2% money. Now, when you factor in the grant money, you do the present value calculation of getting $478,000, I calculated today, your cost of borrowing is about 1.35%. Because you're going to get a benefit from the grant. Make sense? So without getting into a bunch of mathematical computations, your effective cost of borrowing is about 1.34 based on the grant and the 1.94% money as we speak. So, and the rest of this is just kind of some detail. So that's what I wanted to share with you. It's always exciting from my seat, if you will, when we can get cities below 2% money. It's kind of fun, and it's fantastic, and it's a great timing on your behalf. And we know this is a incredibly big decision for you all, and you've studied this for months, and it's nice to see that you're able to come in with such a cost-effective way to borrow money to help you meet your objectives. So with that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm glad to answer any questions, and I hope that was helpful.
Any questions on this side? I almost hate to yell at it. Would you, Chief?
Mike,
Yeah,
do you have any questions?
no.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions on this side? Okay, that's excellent, 1.34%. All right. Okay, further discussion from council? All right. The chair would then entertain a motion.
The recommended action, adopt resolution number 141054. The motion is to adopt resolution number 14-1054.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Me too.
I couldn't make out what he said the second time. Okay.
Me too.
Okay, me too. All right, all opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 3, pursuant to ARS 38-481.03A1 for discussion and consideration of employment and assignment, appointment, promotion, dismissal, salary of town manager Robert Smith, and pursuant to ARS 38-481.03A4 for discussion or consultation with town attorney in order to consider its position and instruct the town attorney regarding the town's position regarding the contract with town manager Robert Smith. We move right on to item 4, do we not?
Mr.
Or is
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
There was a couple of points that I just talked with the town attorney about under compensation 4B.
Okay.
And it has to do with the fact that we had originally anticipated renewing this contract on an annual basis. If Mr. Duffy is here, I have some questions for him.
Okay, great.
It has to do with Section B and Section D, and how those are paid out. If they were paid in a lump sum, we may have to make some prorating adjustments. B being the some additional salary considerations, as originally those were June to June. Had we paid out the full amount already, then we would have to prorate what we're considering in this new agreement, and also in D, the $6,000 into the retirement.
In his prior amount?
Yeah, did
Okay,
you pay it out
yeah.
on a monthly basis, or did you?
Yes, we did. We paid it out on a per paycheck basis.
And so this would start on a monthly basis again in January? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions on this side? Yes, ma'am.
Just for clarification, whenever this contract starts, the old one, which was supposed to go to June, will stop.
Mhm. That's our understanding, correct, Mr. Duffy? Okay. Mike Best, do you have any questions on item 3 of our agenda, the town manager's contract?
Mayor, I think you're on item 4,
I'm on item 4.
because item 3 is the exec session, and I'm assuming that you decided you didn't need to go into the executive
Easy
session.
enough. All right. Could you hear me, Mike?
Yeah, item 3, I had no questions.
Okay.
We worked everything out previously.
Okay.
On this contract, and I didn't see anything new when I saw the copy from our attorney.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, we've moved on to item 4, which is looking at this employment agreement, and you had no questions on the employment agreement, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Other questions from council? Other questions from council? All right, the chair would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve an employment agreement with town manager Robert Smith or an amendment to his current agreement with the town.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Since Mr. Best is out of town, should we allow him to move to adjourn?
Absolutely.
He's been adjourned all week.
Mike, it's your turn to move to adjourn.
I would love to adjourn.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and 2 seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
See you guys on Friday.
Okay, see you then.